This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, you are encouraged to like and share them on Facebook because it's time for Joanne's World of Nutrition, brought to you by Nutrition World in the historic arcade building in Suite 121 across from City Hall in downtown Fort Pierce. And now your host, the one and only Joanne Seeger.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday and Happy New Year. I'm sorry I've missed my listeners, but we had a big move to do for the store. So we moved and doubled in size, and we have the nice new wellness center right next door to us. But keep in mind, it's just across the hallway from where I was, so super easy to find me. So still in the arcade building, now called Kraz Square. I always mispronounce Hans's last name. And so please come visit. The store looks beautiful, all redone, and the wellness center right next door where we're going to have massage and Reiki, biofeedback, infrared sauna, beautiful sitting lounge waiting area. So come in and check it out. Well, this morning, even though it's been a couple weeks that haven't been here, we are going to skip the breathing exercise because I have one of my favorite guests waiting patiently on the line.
But don't stop breathing while listening.
Don't stop
Continue
breathing.
to breathe
Keep
through
breathing.
the show.
So for any newbies, welcome to the show. So glad that you're spending some time with us this morning. So this morning is our wonderful, amazing, very, very smart guest, Cheryl Myers, and she is with the company Terry Naturally, who I love. I have all their products in my store, and I use them personally as well. And Cheryl, she has an amazing background, super smart woman, and she's going to tell her backstory, but I've listened to many of her talks, have had her on my show many times, and she has a gift of letting people know how all these supplements can be implemented in their lives and how they work. So without further ado, good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be able to join you this morning.
Thank you. Yes, I've been like kind of in a whirlwind moving the store over the holidays, so I've kind of, just trying to catch my breath as well. And I was so glad the timing of this show because I was like, oh, I need someone like Cheryl to help me co-host today's show, get me back in the groove.
Well, congratulations on your new digs. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I am so excited. We had a couple treatments in the back of our store before, but it was in the mix of the retail. So when people would come in and just communicate, it was like, oh, treatment's going on. Now we have our quiet side and then we have the retail side. So now everyone can just relax and not get disturbed. So we're super excited.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
And so the timing of this, with the new year, we know that I know a lot of people right now are saying, oh, we don't want to really call it resolutions anymore. But the truth is, even no matter how many times I say I'm not going to do resolutions, I do. I call it different names, my goals or, my objectives to meet. But no matter what, I definitely think this new year brings us the hope of, just taking charge of our lives, making the right choices, and, just feeling better. So I'm hoping today's show gives some help to that goal.
Well, I hope it is too. And I agree with you about resolutions are a lot of pressure. And I always like to think of it more of what can I do in the new year to do a better job of respecting myself, taking care of myself, trying to put it in not like you resolve to do something whether you want to or not, but to do something that benefits me. Like, do I want to drink more water? Do I want to eat more fruit? Do I want to use less plastic? Do I want to substitute walking for a car trip once a week? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I love that.
Something that takes self-care. I think that we can all, it's easier to stick to taking care of yourself, I think, than it is to resolve and formally say, this is what I'm going to do henceforward. I'm going to lose 179 pounds, and I'm going to work out every single day of the week, and that kind of thing.
Cheryl, I have to tell you a little quick personal story. I came home from work last night, and my husband had just visited his mom, and he comes home with like 3 big bags of chocolate. And full. It literally looked like she emptied out her entire home of anything to do with chocolate and had him bring it over to my house. I said, wait a second here. I'm also, thinking New Year, less chocolate, less sugar, and now I have Ghirardelli, to the ceiling. But
oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I just thought that was kind of funny because it is true, I'm looking at it like one day at a time. I'm going to do the best I can each day, be the best version of myself, but it is a struggle for all of us. And what I brought up to you when you asked me what would I like you to talk about, because you're so well versed in really everything, was, I have so many female customers coming in on a daily basis, super confused, super upset about their thyroid. They have so many different challenges. So for anyone listening, this is basically going to be the topic, but Cheryl is very informative about all subjects. So if you'd like to call in and ask questions, please do so, 340-1590 on any health topic. But Cheryl, can you tell my audience your background so they can see why you're so well-versed in everything?
Well, my first degree is in nursing, so I am a registered nurse, and I worked in mainstream healthcare for many years, and then one of my jobs was as a pain control specialist in hospice care, and that's end-of-life care. And a lot of my patients were trying everything and asking me questions. They would say, what about this herb, or what about this special diet, or what about these touch therapies? They had all these questions. Well, I went to Purdue, which is a good school, but it tends to be kind of rigid. Nobody had taught me about any of these things. The message I got in college was there's one way, and only one way, and you do not stray from the path. So it started to open my eyes to the possibilities out there, because as I would try to research their questions and find answers, I became a little bit more enlightened and open-minded myself. And the next thing I knew, I was body and soul sucked into the integrative health industry. I believe in integrative health, which means you don't choose one or the other. So I don't think it's alternative. I hate it when they say alternative medicine. Medicine is medicine. It's just what flavor do you choose. I don't think it's complementary, because we're not trying to complement mainstream medicine. Sometimes the natural intervention is more powerful than the mainstream intervention. I think you integrate them together. I like the smorgasbord idea of medicine, where you choose from the dish that best serves you. And sometimes that might be chiropractic care, and sometimes that might be orthopedic surgeon care. I often say, if I'm in a car accident, if I'm run over by a pickup truck, please do not take me to an aromatherapist. Take me to a trauma center. Mainstream medicine does trauma really, really well. But when you start to look at chronic diseases, when you start to look at complex illnesses, when you look at prevention, there's so many places out there where we need more than one dish to choose from. So I'm not against mainstream medicine, but that is certainly not the only answer for a lot of the health struggles that people are facing.
Very well said. Very well said. And the thyroid, I know that is a challenge out of most topics, because I feel like a lot of the information that's out there is very unclear about how to, like you said, utilize the whole world of medicine, because there's so much confusion about who to turn to, what tests to take, and how to get your situation resolved. So I'm hoping today's show can put some clarity on this issue.
Well, when we talk about the thyroid gland, first let me start by saying I believe that the majority of people over the age of 40 have some issue with their thyroid gland not working up to optimal levels. So number one, I think it's an epidemic. And number two is I think there's a lot of things that we've done that perhaps we can discuss during the show today that have caused this epidemic. But number three, let me just talk about what the thyroid gland does. So it's this butterfly-shaped gland at the base of your neck that works to create a hormone called thyroxine. And thyroxine is a hormone that is incredibly important in your body, because it dictates how quickly you turn fuel into energy. You know, you burn fuel in your car to make energy to make the car go. Well, your body also burns fuel, which is the food that we eat, to turn it into the energy we need to get up and go as well. And not just for the energy to chase after your kids or go dancing at night, but the energy of the bones to knit, of the heart to beat, of the lungs to pump. You know, all of these different activities in the body require uninterrupted, optimal amounts of energy. So this is an incredibly important gland. And if you start to see problems with the production of thyroid hormone, thyroxine, then you start to see a slowdown of the machine. You don't heal as quickly. You don't bounce back from things as quickly. You start to see weight gain because if the fuel doesn't get burned, guess what? It gets turned into the storage form of fuel, and that's fat tissue. So you start to put on weight. Your energy levels go down. Your brain isn't clicking. You kind of feel foggy all the time. And sometimes people call that thyroid brain fog. You can feel depressed. They estimate that over 50% of individuals diagnosed with clinical depression, in fact, either instead have or also have depressed thyroid activity. So it's crucially important to make sure that your thyroid gland is doing what it needs to do, which is to make optimal amounts of a thyroid hormone called thyroxine. Now, that said, this hormone is made in two forms. There's a storage form, which they call T4. That's what the T4 stands for. And then there's the active form called T3. So the active form is what your body needs. So some people have difficulties making enough thyroxine in the first place. Other people make enough of it, but it doesn't convert correctly from the storage form into the active form. And yet other people actually develop an autoimmune disease which creates antibodies against thyroid hormone, which takes it out of circulation or impedes its activity. So there's lots and lots of things that can happen with the thyroid gland to cause us to have an overall suppression of optimal levels of thyroid hormone being produced. Now, there is a slow, just as in most things, as we age, there's a bit of a slowdown. We don't make as much thyroxine when we're 70 as we did when we were 25 years old. But it shouldn't slow down to the point where you're experiencing physical symptoms. You know, there's some statistics out there that kind of I feel are heartbreaking. And I was shocked when I read this one statistic. They did a survey of people waking up in the morning, whether they felt refreshed every day. Only 1 in 7 Americans stated that they wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go.
That is depressing.
So,
and I know that's true. I mean, I hear it every day, people saying, well, I stayed in bed, but I woke up either depressed or anxious or super tired.
You know, and 45%, so almost half of all women that responded to a survey, reported feeling fatigue due to stress. You know, they get really stressed out easily. They get lots of fatigue. They're just not. It's just not working the way it's supposed to. So if you have low thyroid function, and you know, by the way, I should have mentioned when we were talking about the thyroid gland, there's another problem you can have, which is your thyroid works too well. That's called hyperthyroidism. You know, when you say that somebody's running around and they're kind of out of control and little kids are screaming, you say, wow, they're really hyper today.
Yep.
So hyper means kind of sped up, and hypo means slowed down. So hyper, the thyroid has sped up, and there's a lot of reasons that can cause that. That's actually in the minority. The vast majority of people with thyroid dysfunction have low thyroid function. So when people have low thyroid function or hypothyroidism, they sleep a long time. They get drowsy. Sometimes they have to nap in the afternoon. They get so tired that they have to take a nap to get up and finish the day. If they are left uninterrupted, they'll sleep for 9, 10, 11 hours at a time. They often crave certain foods like carbohydrates and fats. They are intolerant to cold. They get cold easily, or they have trouble getting warm. You know how you get chilled if you go outside and shovel the snow? Because you do that in Florida so often.
Yeah,
we do
every
that a lot
day,
in Wisconsin.
every day.
But you go out and you get super cold, and then you come in and you warm up. People with low thyroid have a real difficult time getting their body heat back up to normal. In younger women with low thyroid function, they tend to have extremely heavy menstrual cycles, and they tend to be very irregular. So they'll have a menstrual cycle, and then 3 weeks later have another, and then maybe it's 2.5 months before they have another one. So very irregular periods, but when they do have them, they're very, very heavy. Hair loss is another hallmark of low thyroid function, as the hair begins to thin. So there's lots of different things that happen with low thyroid function that some people mistake for, well, I'm just getting older, or I'm overweight, so that's why I'm tired all the time, or, there's just so many names, or I'm depressed.
Right.
That's why I'm tired all the time, and I'm overeating, and I'm putting on weight, all that kind of thing. So we label it everything, but we don't tend to investigate, well, is there something not working right in our body? And very often, the truth of the matter is that the thyroid gland is not doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Now, this is complicated by the fact that most doctors, not all, most doctors have a mindset that there's one test that you do for thyroid function, and it's called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And TSH is not even a thyroid hormone, it is a pituitary hormone. So when your thyroid hormone gets too low in the bloodstream, the endocrine gland that makes this, or the pituitary gland that makes this, sends out a signal, says, hey, thyroid gland, speed it up. Let's get going. The trouble is that TSH doesn't give you a full picture. So a lot of people get a normal TSH, and the doctor says, you don't have any thyroid problems, and then you go back to self-blaming again. I'm overweight, I'm tired, my hair is getting thinner, I need to exercise, but I don't have the energy. They tell themselves all these negative stories because the doctor just looked at one thing. The other thing is that sometimes if you have a conversion problem, your body makes enough thyroid hormone, but it doesn't convert to the active form, that's not going to show up on a TSH. If there's a problem with your pituitary gland making thyroid-stimulating hormone, that could be sending out false readings. And last but not least, there's a huge range. So I'm just making this up because I don't have the numbers in front of me. But let's pretend that the range is 3 to 10. If you're at 3.1, you're going to feel a heck of a lot different than if you're at 9.5. They act like as long as you're in the normal range, you should be feeling just fine. So if you're just barely above normal, and you still experience all these symptoms, you are like 1 decimal point away from being put on medication the rest of your life. So it's not a drop-off event, and there's a growing movement, not just amongst integrative practitioners, but also mainstream doctors, to stop treating the number and start treating the person.
Yeah, we definitely have to get to that point. Definitely.
Absolutely. We have to make a difference in helping people. So if you technically come out normal, quote normal, I hate that word normal, if you come out within the range that doctors consider normal for thyroid, but you still experience these symptoms, I think it's still important to look at something called suboptimal thyroid function. That means that you're not in the abnormal range, hypothyroidism, but you're not in the optimal range. So it's a little bit, I like to think of it as like pre-diabetes. Your blood sugars are running high, but they're not running high enough to diagnose as diabetes. So that's what happens with suboptimal thyroid hormone. Your thyroid is slowing down, but it hasn't quite gotten far enough down to be classified as a disease, but it certainly needs some bolstering.
Yeah, and as you always teach, prevention is the best policy. You don't wait until you're in this dismal state, to start looking into why you feel so horrible. I just want to, because you're on this exact part of the subject right now, you were on my show a long time ago on this subject, and I did take the quiz that Terry offers that we have at the store, and my doctor did tell me my thyroid was normal, but when I took the quiz, I literally was checking off, I think I checked off every box but 2. And I said, oh my gosh, I have all the symptoms. And so I started the formula, and after it was about 120 days before I retook the quiz, there was only 1 check mark that I checked off after that. And ever since then, I've been telling all my customers that to look into, like you're about to discuss, all the different testing methods, and also like taking this quiz because we do that, you do this terrible guilt trip, like, oh, if I just could lose the weight, then everything would normalize, and if I just don't eat that, or if I just exercise more, but when you're tired and you look in the mirror and you feel like, oh, I don't look the same, I don't feel the same, it gets challenging. And definitely that quiz definitely gave me that little, I don't know, that little oomph I needed to know it's not just me,
Isn't it sad that we need permission to say, maybe something's wrong here. It's not just because I'm lacking as a human being. Maybe there's something not working right. I see it a lot in women over 50 because it is true that when you go through menopause, you do have a little bit of a hormonal slowdown with the thyroid gland, but they blame everything on menopause. They say, oh my gosh, my fatigue is due to menopause, my weight gain is due to No, it might well be, in many instances, due to the fact that your thyroid gland is not working the way it's supposed to. And the reason we're having so many thyroid problems today, and by the way, did you know that the number one most prescribed drug in America is Synthroid, synthetic thyroid hormone?
I did not know
crazy?
that. And also, too,
Yes,
and dosing that, like I hear all the time, oh, they changed my dose, and now it's too high, now it's too low, and it doesn't even seem to really be helping. So
I hear you. And also, speaking of prevention, thyroid cancer has tripled. It's gone up 300% in the last 30 years. So there's a lot of reasons why our thyroids are not working the way they should, and one of them has to do with our diet. Now, when we look at crops that are grown, they are grown in increasingly iodine-deficient soils, and they're finding that in crops grown in the United States, there's up to 50% less iodine in the plants than used to be back in the 1970s, 1980s. There also used to be in commercial baked goods, flour conditioners were based on iodine. So if you ate a single slice of bread in 1974, you got your full day's RDI of iodine. Now, in the late 70s, I think it was around 79 or 80, they switched to bromide-based dough conditioners in commercial baked goods. Bromides are actually, in high doses, carcinogenic. So they moved from a really healthy intervention in commercial baking to one that is not very healthy. So we lost that as a source of iodine. Iodine has three cousins. If you ever look at the periodic table of elements, iodine is in a perfect lineup with three others that are their cousins, and that's fluoride, chlorine, bromide, and astatine. Those four cousins, rather. Sorry, I said three. But there's four, and every one of them looks a little bit like iodine, and every one of them is toxic. There's all these, we could probably spend a whole show talking about fluoride and fluoridation of water systems and fluoride dental treatments and such. Chlorine is toxic, bromides are toxic, bromines and bromides are toxic, and they're everywhere. Did you know that they use brominated vegetable oil in a lot of citrus soft drinks like Mountain Dew and such?
Yep, I've seen that everywhere. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, and all of these look a little bit like iodine. Now, the reason that that's super dangerous is every cell in our body has an iodine receptor. Every single cell in our body has an iodine receptor. And I always think of it as, Cinderella and the beautiful slipper where only one person could fit into the shoe. Well, only iodine can fit into this slot, except that these cousins look enough like iodine that they can wiggle themselves into the attachment point where iodine is supposed to be and compete with iodine for that. And that's why it's really dangerous. So not only are we not getting as much iodine in the diet as we used to, we are also having huge increases in our exposure to iodine's competitors. So is that not like a perfect storm situation? You're not getting enough iodine in the first place, but you are getting buckets and buckets of chemicals that compete with iodine in your body for attachment to receptor sites. It's really amazing. And then we also have people who say, well, I eat salt, and salt has iodine in it. So the truth of the matter is, no, salt doesn't really have much
necessarily.
iodine in it. Pardon me?
That's what I was going to say. Not necessarily, because now they've taken out of that too.
Iodine is added to table salt. It's a supplement because so many people were iodine deficient that in the 30s and 40s that scientists scratched their heads and says, what's something that people eat every day that we can add iodine to so that we quit having all these people getting goiter, which is extreme iodine insufficiency. And they called the Midwest the goiter belt because we didn't have access to seafood, which is a rich source of iodine. So they said, well, let's add it to salt. So if you look at salt, it's iodized salt. Well, the younger generations growing up just believe that because they've always heard iodines in salt, that all salt is really, really high in iodine. That's not true. I mean, there's a lot of salts that I would prefer to use. I like the pink Himalayan salt. I like the Celtic. There's a Celtic gray sea salt. These are wonderful and very healthy salts, but they don't contain enormous amounts of iodine. Last but not least, when you look at salt, the chemical formula for salt is sodium chloride. What did we just say competes with iodine for attachment to receptor sites in the body?
Yep,
Chlorines and chlorides.
Exactly.
So they didn't do it on purpose. They did it unknowingly. They decided to put supplemental iodine into a food that actually has a component that competes with iodine for attachment to receptor sites. So relying on iodized salt to have optimal iodine in our bodies is really not something that's going to work out in the long run. In fact, recent studies have found that when we look at women of reproductive age in America, they looked at because low iodine in pregnancy is a very bad thing for the baby. They found that these women have 55% less iodine in their body than women in the 1970s. So more than half. We've lost more than half of our daily iodine by the changes that we have done to our food supply and our environment.
And it makes sense because with all these changes and having all these chemicals in our body, you see the effect. I mean, people walking around, very tired, very anxious, very depressed, and it's really disheartening and
overweight, gaining weight without knowing why they're gaining weight.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason iodine is so important for the thyroid gland is because that's what the thyroid gland uses to make thyroid hormone. It uses two ingredients. It uses iodine, and it uses an amino acid called L-tyrosine. And the thyroid gland grabs these two nutrients and crochets them together, and voila, you have thyroid hormone. If you don't have enough of either, well, what's the thyroid gland supposed to do? It just sits there and waits for the raw materials to come along. When we look at Japan, for example, people eating a traditional Japanese diet, and people in Okinawa, which is one of the blue zones where it has a disproportionate number of people living healthy lives past the age of 100, these individuals, if they're eating a traditional diet, not Big Macs and KFC, have 25 times higher intake of iodine than people in the United States. Isn't that amazing?
It is, and I was just talking about that group just with a few customers, and we brought up the seafood. Now, the problem is, I'm not sure where you live, Cheryl, if it's happening, but here in Florida, even our seafood is grown in tanks now. And so I'm wondering that now we can't even trust the seafood to have the right amount of iodine naturally because, it's being fed chemical solutions and colorants to make this fish not look like Frankenfish. And it's like, I know that this is a huge, huge tanker system going in very close to us. And I almost want to go there and say, what do you do for the iodine for the fish? Because I feel like now they're going to get all industrialized too and not provide us any iodine.
Well, the reason that ocean fish have a lot of iodine is because they eat the sea vegetables that are really rich in iodine. And if they're the kind of fish that eat other fish, they're eating other fish that ate the sea vegetables that are rich in iodine. So it's actually the sea vegetables. Now, when you look at, again, Japan, Okinawa, some parts of coastal China, they incorporate sea vegetables into their diet, but we don't in the United States. We don't do very much with these iodine-rich sea vegetables.
Yeah, so that's definitely a problem. Like, I love seaweed. But it's like it's not available, or you have to worry about the contamination of the sea vegetables too. So another tricky one.
It sure is. It sure is. We have a lot of work to do, don't we, to clean up our planet?
We do. That could be like 10 shows, right?
For sure.
Well, but so we spent most part of the show, talking about all the reasons to consider iodine and your thyroid. So after a break, I definitely think we can tell them the upside to this story, right? And the solutions and how to stay positive. And definitely Terry has something that could help all of us. So everyone stay tuned. And after the break, Cheryl Myers from Terry Naturally, educator and scientist and author, will come back and tell us more about this mystery gland and all the wonders it does.
And now back to Joanne's World of Nutrition. Once again, here's your host, Joanne Seeger.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning. I have Cheryl Myers with us today from Terry Naturally. We are discussing the thyroid and all its mysteries. So if you are just kind of waking up and feeling like, the doctor told me my thyroid is just A-okay, but you still feel a little bit off in any way, you definitely want to listen to the show. And remember, if you missed any of it, Cliff always, within a couple days after the show, posts it on YouTube. So
try to get it up within 24 hours.
Within 24 hours, yep. Don't want to put too much pressure on you. But yeah, you can listen to the whole show. And we also have lots of great free handouts at Nutrition World. So come check it out. Terry, the company, definitely loves educating all of its consumers. So
this is Cheryl Myers, and I am experiencing some audio difficulties. I am not hearing any part of the radio.
Oops. Okay, let's try it again.
Okay, Cheryl, can you hear me now?
Can you hear Joanne now?
No.
Wow. I wonder what happened. That's a highly...
I can only hear you.
Okay, let me turn her up a little more. Go ahead, Joanne, see if she can hear you.
Okay, testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hear me now, Cheryl? I feel like that phone commercial.
Nothing.
All right, so she's not picking anything up. Let me put you on hold for just a second.
All right,
Cheryl.
Everyone. So we're going to get Cheryl back on the line because we definitely want to get another 20 good minutes of education from her.
Can you hear Joanne now, Cheryl?
No, I cannot.
Wow. That's unusual.
Okay.
Can we hang up and call back in?
Yes, hang up and call back in, and we'll chit-chat, and I'll watch
Thanks,
the phone.
Cheryl.
So
okay.
Yeah, just
all
call
right,
back.
So while we figure out the phone lines, everybody, at the store, we have in every subject that you can probably think of education pamphlets. And on these pamphlets, some of them are really extensive. And the thyroid one is very, very detailed. And what I love is there is a quiz. This quiz is extremely beneficial when you're a little bit confused what's going on. Is it your adrenals? Is it menopause? Is it thyroid? You just take each question at a time, and then by the end, you really do get a good gauge if it's thyroid. Mine definitely was thyroid related, and so... Cheryl, can you hear me now?
Radio show?
Oh, just a minute.
Can you hear?
Okay.
Can you hear Joanne
oh yeah,
now?
I just heard her pick up. Okay.
No, somebody answered and with your call.
Yeah, the office picked it up there. There you go. How about now?
Cheryl, can you hear me now?
Okay, let's try one other thing. Okay, now try it one more time, Joanne.
Cheryl, can you hear me now? Wow, this is a first. This is a first. Okay.
Everything is exactly as it was in the first part of the show.
Well, I can hear you just fine. I don't understand why I can't hear Joanne.
No, she's on the same channel as I am. You should be able to hear her just as easy as you hear me.
This is crazy.
Yeah. Try it one more time, Joanne.
Okay, just wiggle this. Cheryl?
Yes. Hi, Joanne.
Yay!
I can hear you.
How are you, girl? I haven't talked to you in so long.
Wow, sometimes the gremlins get into our machines and wreak havoc, don't they?
Well, you know what I did? I wiggled my my headphone wire, and that did it. So maybe this was loose. Okay. Well, it's so good. And maybe because I remember I was saying that you were going in and out a lot in the first half of the show. So maybe that was the issue all along where I felt like I was losing you. All right. Well, it's okay. We still got 17 solid minutes. So the first part, you were explaining to us what the thyroid is and the issues with iodine and the receptors. So what's some solution for all my listeners if they are feeling that thyroid is possibly their issue?
Well, one of the things that we believe is you have to provide amounts of iodine to the body that are not just enough to prevent goiter, but enough to actually provide the thyroid gland with what it needs to make optimal levels of thyroid hormone. And we use a blend of three different forms of iodine. Iodine is needed for so many things in the body. I mean, there's some great studies on helping to prevent certain kinds of cancers, especially hormonally based cancers and breast tissue and prostate tissue. There are studies on iodine and brain function. There are studies on, so it's not just localized to the thyroid gland. There's many, many reasons that the body needs optimal iodine for support. So the reason we use three forms is that each one works a little tiny bit differently. We have potassium iodide, which is the form the thyroid gland likes the best, but also molecular iodine, which is preferred by other types of cellular tissues. And last but not least, a form called sodium iodide, because it is the most soluble form of iodine and it facilitates the absorption of the other forms. To that, we add L-tyrosine, that amino acid that's the other part of the equation. So while thyroid care does not contain thyroid hormone, it contains the two precursor compounds that the thyroid gland uses to, as I say, crochet together and make thyroxine. This product, Thyroid Care, won 2015 Better Nutrition Best of Supplements Award for providing for thyroid health. And we have recently launched an additional product called Thyroid Care Plus for individuals who maybe their issue isn't making thyroid hormone, it's the conversion. So it's the same amount of the three forms of iodine plus the L-tyrosine and 300 micrograms of selenium, because selenium is a nutrient that is required to convert T4, the storage form, into T3, the active form. So we have two different kinds of thyroid care products for people to choose from to see which one works best for them.
My customers are loving the Thyroid Care Plus, absolutely loving it.
I'm a big one for plus products too.
Well,
like
and also, yeah, they're looking
extra.
at it like, well, okay, this was amazing, but they improved on it, so let's get the new and improved.
You know what? When I was a Girl Scout, one of the songs that they taught us, and we sang every single time we met, was "Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold." So, for individuals that are getting fantastic results from thyroid care, they obviously don't need to have anything additional. But for people who maybe need that extra because they're not good converters, I think Thyroid Care Plus is a godsend.
That's a great way to explain it. I love that. That is.
So both of these products can be extremely useful for individuals who are struggling with suboptimal thyroid function. You can titrate the dose a little bit, start with 1 capsule in the morning, go to 2 capsules in the morning. You can even go to 3 capsules in the morning. We generally say in the morning because the thyroid gland works most during the daytime, so you don't want to provide things that stimulate the thyroid gland at bedtime, So I'm not saying that there's anything in here that's a stimulant, but it's better to try to, when you're trying to supplement a system, it's better to try to go with the natural biorhythms of that system. And if it's most active in the daytime, supplement in the daytime. We do recommend you take it on an empty stomach if possible, because the L-tyrosine, that amino acid, there's some studies that show that it works a little bit better on an empty stomach. But if you can't and you take it with food, nothing bad is going to happen. You'll just have a little less L-tyrosine on board. Now, if that sounds like a strange name and people don't know what L-tyrosine is, an amino acid, these are the building blocks of protein. So I always think of them as Legos. You know how Legos come in all different colors, reds and yellows.
Oh, I know very well, yes.
I bet you've stepped on a few.
Oh, yeah.
So when you snap them together, they build something. Well, amino acids are the same thing. You snap them together and they build something. So chicken might be 4 greens, a blue, a black, and a white. And peanut butter might be 6 yellows and 4 oranges. So there are different kinds of amino acids that when you snap them in different configurations create different types of protein. So L-tyrosine is a protein building block, but used in this formula, when it's given at the same time as the iodine, it makes it really easy for the thyroid gland to grab onto both of these nutrients to weave it into exactly what it needs.
Okay, and that's a perfect example. And I know I've sold throughout the years so much tyrosine, And so to have the two together, because people are looking for now convenience as well. So you make it extremely convenient and affordable to nurture the thyroid. And like you said, first thing in the morning, that way you don't forget, wake up, pop it, and you're done. But Cheryl, sometimes there is a little confusion when they see the other options. So your company does offer the triiodine with different micrograms. How would you guide them to which one should they choose, doing the triiodine by itself or the thyroid care formula?
Well, if you're looking for thyroid support, if you want your thyroid gland to work better and make more thyroid hormone, thyroid care is the way to go. Absolutely. But there's other things that people use iodine for. I mentioned menopausal transitions. That menopause can cause some discomfort that can be ameliorated with iodine. Women that maybe they've had breast cancer in the past and they're putting together a prevention program. There are people that have brain fog associated with other problems. For example, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. Sometimes there's a brain fog that goes along with that where people just feel foggy in the mornings. Iodine can be really, really useful for that. There's some great studies on using iodine for fibrocystic breast disease. In fact, I think the study said 94% cure rate in individuals using iodine as treatment options. So you have a lot of different studies out there that are not necessarily thyroid specific, but do utilize iodine. So that's why we also offer, in addition to a product that's designed for the thyroid specifically, iodine, the 3 forms of iodine in various dosages on its own. Will it support the thyroid? Of course. Iodine goes everywhere and does everything, but it's also more targeting problems not associated with the thyroid gland. Additionally, if you do not have a thyroid gland, if you've had thyroid cancer and the doctor removed your thyroid gland, if you had hyperthyroidism and they used radiation to destroy your thyroid gland, they call that ablation in order to cure your hyperthyroidism. You do not need thyroid care because you no longer have a thyroid, but you certainly, absolutely still need iodine, and that's another place where you can use the triiodine.
Okay, and there's all different strengths, and I know that I followed Terry's guide that he mentioned one time at one of his lectures where I did 90 days, a pretty stronger dose, and then I tapered off from that. Are you still going along those lines? Have you changed those guidelines at all?
Well, there's an iodine expert. It was one of the people that started the revolution of using iodine medicinally, and that's Dr. David Brownstein. He's an internist from just outside of Detroit, Michigan, who wrote a book called Iodine, Why You Need It, Why You Can't Live Without It. It's an awesome book. It's like an iodine Bible of all. It's got enough science that'll satisfy healthcare practitioners, but it's also written in layman's language enough that anybody can understand what he's trying to say. And that was his protocol. He started for 60 to 90 days at higher dosages to saturate the body. But he was using that not necessarily for thyroid issues. He was using that for some of the other issues. And you do that if you choose, or if you don't choose to do that, you can just use your regular dose. It's just you're going to take a little bit longer to get where you want to be.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I know it definitely worked for me, and I do always suggest Googling Dr. Brownstein, seeing what I know. Like, yes, in all the bookstores, softcover, hardcover, very reasonable price book. So, and what is the title again, Cheryl? Can you remind my listeners?
Iodine, Why You Need It, Why You Can't Live Without It, Dr. David Brownstein.
Perfect.
There's another one by Dr. Robert Thompson, another internist, called What Doctors Fail to Tell You About Iodine and Your Thyroid. That's more thyroid specific. That's a good book, too, for people that are struggling with this or think that they might be having some issues with their thyroid gland. Now, there's a couple of things that if you start using iodine medicinally that you should be aware of. Number one is iodine pushes out toxins, because remember, you've been taking in the chlorides and the bromides and the acetines and the fluorides and all that, so it pushes out, and some of it comes out through the skin. So sometimes when people start, especially if they start with a dosage regimen like you did with higher dosages, they might have some itchy skin and they think, oh, am I having an allergic reaction? No. Generally, it is because of the fact that you've got a high dose of iodine and you're pushing the bromides out through the perspiration, and it can cause some itchy skin. if you break out in hives, that's an allergic reaction, or have trouble breathing, that's an allergic reaction, but just itchy skin is not. So just want to, it doesn't happen to everyone, and if it does happen, take your dose down a little bit so you're not pushing the toxins out quite so quickly. Another thing is when you start using iodine medicinally, it temporarily causes a false positive on the TSH test. So I've had individuals that have used iodine medicinally to help their thyroid gland that were struggling, and for the first time they're getting some relief. It's like all of a sudden they're waking up in the morning and having a better time getting out of bed. They have a little bit of energy left at the end of the day. They've maybe dropped a pound or two, and they're like, wow, I'm on the road to recovery. This is really working. And they go to the doctor and they get a TSH test, and he says, oh, my God, your thyroid's failing. What are you doing? Stop, stop, stop. It's very frightening. No, nothing could be further from the truth. It's just that when you first start using iodine medicinally, it does cause a false positive on the TSH. If you, for further investigation, you need to have the laboratory studies T3 and T4, which will show that your thyroid hormone status is perfectly fine. Those false positives generally go away as your body gets used to a new dose of iodine. It can take 6 months, though. So I just warn people to be aware that there can be some false positives. And Dr. Brownstein outlines this in his book. Listen to how your body feels. And if you're really concerned, have the tests T3 and T4, not the TSH.
Yeah, luckily, I've only had one customer run into that false positive, and I asked her because sometimes, I forget the number language, with the testing, and I said, but you're feeling so good. And I said, even like her thinness on her scalp seemed to be lessening, like everything was improving in her life. I said, right? And she's like, yeah, but he's really concerned. Thinks I'm, doing something wrong. I said, but everything is going well. But, it does, they scare sometimes, sometimes when they get that news, they get scared. So
I understand. But, if your TSH was really an indicator that your thyroid was failing, your symptoms would be getting worse, not better.
That's exactly what I told her. See, those common sense things I'm sure of. When I look at someone and they feel vibrant and energetic and their moods are getting more stable and their hair's not thinning as much, they're going in the right direction. So.
And as I said, the iodine does not cause any changes to the laboratory tests T3 and T4, which is what I think doctors should be using anyway, instead of the TSH, because there's so many false issues with the TSH. If you measure the actual hormone in the bloodstream, you will be reassured. It will be steadily, slightly increasing. It takes a little bit, but it's going in the right direction.
All right, and I know we all do know when we're feeling better, when we wake up and there's a little more energy in our steps and, feel like clarity of mind. And and Cheryl, like you mentioned the menopause thing a couple times, that's all my listeners know. I've brought that to their attention that I've just, entering that in this last year. And it's had different challenges that I wasn't expecting and some that I was. But the iodine definitely, bringing that back in. I've been itching, and I honestly didn't know what it was. So thank you, because none of my customers have ever complained. So I'm hoping that maybe I have been doing way too much flour and all those bromides and chlorides and fluorides, and now the iodine's kicking that stuff out, because I have been feeling itchier than normal. So yeah.
Well, that is one of the things that, it doesn't happen very often. I almost hesitate to bring it up, because usually people have no issues whatsoever with using iodine. But, in a weird way, that's a good sign, because it's doing what you want it to do. And just pull the dose back a little bit, or if it's usually itching on the arms. It's I don't know why, arms and sometimes armpits. So I just say cool shower. If it's really bothering you, pull the dose way back, and that itching will come right down. And
okay, that sounds good. Yeah, because I've been doing infrared sauna as well, so I feel like that's my personality. And when I go for it 100%. So I'm probably like
stimulating perspiration.
Yeah, I'm like doing detox central. Yep, I'm just gonna
detoxing.
Yeah, I got a lot of celebrating over this last year, so definitely got my hands full of toxins. Oh my gosh, Cheryl! All right, so we only have 2 minutes left. Anything you can think of that we didn't cover in 2 minutes?
Well, Well, one thing that I'm passionate about is because there is such a thyroid epidemic and a suboptimal thyroid. If your thyroid hormone is not working correctly, you're going to have fertility issues because your body needs a certain level of heat to release an egg. And that's why women who are trying to get pregnant have to take their temperature before they get out of bed, because when the temperature goes up, that means they're ovulating. That's why women who have suboptimal thyroid function sometimes have very irregular periods, is because they're not ovulating in a predictable manner. You don't need thyroid care necessarily, but using some triiodine to help improve your metabolism, to improve the thyroid function, to help your body be able to attain the degree of heat that it needs to release an egg, can be very useful for some people that are struggling with irregular periods and having trouble with fertility.
Wow, that's an awesome way to end the show, Cheryl, because that is another huge topic. Cheryl, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. I always appreciate you giving us some of your time, and I hope 2020 brings you and your family the most blessed and amazing new year, and hopefully we'll set up some new dates soon.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Take care. All right, everyone. Well, next week, I'm not sure if it's a third Thursday, but if it is, it will be with Dr. Ravi. And if not, we'll be talking about the digestive system. So everyone have an amazing week and catch you soon. And come by the new store and see what it looks like.
Archives of Joanne's World of Nutrition can be found on YouTube under WPSL TV. And some of the hashtags for this week's show: thyroid, Terry Naturally, Cheryl Myers. And this is WPSL, Port St. Lucie, the home of Joanne's World of Nutrition. Be sure to visit Nutrition World in the historic Arcade Building. Suite 121, or is it a new number now?
118 and 120.
118 and 120